What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 7 top 70 flex rankings. The positional rankings have already been posted. Now we're combining the running backs, wide receivers, and the tight ends. If you guys enjoy the video, smash that like button, subscribe. I would really appreciate it. But let's just dive right into Tier 1. Not going to spend a ton of time on these early names. These are obviously going to be locks in your lineup. We have Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Amon-Ra St. Brown, JSN, Josh Jacobs, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Justin Jefferson. You're always going to start your studs. Those are the studs. Now moving into Tier 2, also guys that in any normal size league are going to be locks in your lineup. We're going to go Jamar Chase, Drake London, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams, CeeDee Lamb earlier on in the week. Didn't put him in my wide receiver rankings. Wasn't super confident he was going to play this week. At this point, it seems like more like than not, he will be suiting up, coming back from that ankle injury. I think you fire him up with a lot of confidence. It doesn't feel like they're rushing him back. And if CeeDee Lamb's on the field, he's obviously going to be an absolute monster. Then I have Rome Odunze coming off a down game, was really kind of a bad call away from having like a fine 3 for 50 and a touchdown. Ends up being rough with that touchdown getting called back. Still someone who I have a lot of confidence in. Then I have Jalen Waddle, someone who I think is still underrated. He's had 2 big games without Tyreek Hill, 6 for 110 and a touchdown, 6 for 95. He's going to command a lot of volume. He's the Dolphins' clear-cut number 1 target. I like the matchup here against the Browns, who are really tough against the run. So Jalen Waddle is someone who I think is a really nice option. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Davante Adams. Think he's going to command a lot of volume in this game. Puka unlikely to play, dealing with that ankle injury. Puka had obviously just been like a volume sponge. I think Davante Adams is going to have a really nice game. Now moving into Tier 3, going to start it off with Kyren Williams. Just been a pretty steady option so far this season. He's the running back 10 in points per game. I have him ranked here at number 17. Then I have Saquon Barkley going up against the Vikings. He's been underwhelming, averaging under 15 PPR points per game. We haven't seen a lot of that big play upside, averaging only 3.4 yards per carry. And then not the best matchup here against the Vikings. I still think in your normal size leagues, he's going to be in your lineup, but he's certainly been disappointing as an early to mid round 1 pick in redraft. Then I have Rachaad White, just really strong without Bucky Irving in the lineup, 23.1 and 17.7 PPR points. He's averaging a very strong 19 opportunities per game. After White, I've got Ashton Genty going up against the Chiefs. Now, in terms of matchup, this isn't great. The Raiders' offense has been struggling. They have the second lowest implied point total this week, but Genty's usage has been really strong. In the last 3 games, he's averaging 19.3 carries and 4.3 targets. Even in an offense that's not great, I still think that's going to get it done, even against this Chiefs defense. Then in that same matchup, I have Rashee Rice making his return, coming back from his suspension. All the reports are that the Chiefs are just going to unleash him. He's not going to have any weird reacclimation process. He's not going to be on some sort of snap count. I'm expecting Rashee Rice to produce right away, which means he is a really strong option. Then I've got Nico Collins going up against the Seahawks. Been a little bit underwhelming this season, but still a solid wide receiver 1. Clear number 1 target for CJ Stroud. It's not a great matchup here against the Seahawks, but I still feel like you think Nico's a nice play. Then I have George Pickens. Did move him down a little bit. I think I had him ranked at wide receiver 3. Obviously, before I was confident that CeeDee Lamb was coming back. I do think Lamb coming back does, take a little bit of a hit to his value, but George Pickens has been a monster this season, and that doesn't just disappear just because CeeDee Lamb is back. He's still going to be a big part of this offense. This passing attack is going to be electric. I mean, Dak's been playing at a super high level, and that's without CeeDee Lamb, so maybe he's not like that high-end wide receiver 1, but he's certainly not like a lower upside like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins type. T. Higgins this season, without Joe Burrow. He could still be a fantasy wide receiver 1 moving forward. I just think that elite upside, probably not there, but still an awesome option. In that same matchup, I have Deebo Samuel going up against the Cowboys. We'll see about Terry playing this week. I do think he returned to practice on Wednesday, but it was kind of like a walkthrough type situation. Wasn't like a, full legit practice. So we'll see if he returns. As of right now, I'm not super confident Terry plays. which is why I have Debo up here. He's the wide receiver 13 in points per game. I love this matchup. The Cowboys are allowing the most points per game to the wide receiver position, but I would move Debo down a little bit if Terry did make his return this week. Then I have Quinshawn Judkins going up against the Dolphins. I really like this matchup here against Miami. They're allowing the 6th most points per game to the running back position. Judkins is coming off a really rough week 6. I believe he only scored 3.6 PPR points, but this could be a much different game script. I do think it's a little bit concerning though, because he's not necessarily as game script proof as I thought, where if they are trailing, which I'm not saying it's super likely in this matchup, but it is possible, the Dolphins offense has looked fine. If they are trailing and now he's bleeding snaps to Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson, that's certainly not ideal when we're looking at his overall floor, but I do think his ceiling in this matchup this week is pretty high. And then the final player in tier 3 is going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt going up against the Cowboys. Really strong usage on Monday Night Football, 75% opportunity share. He took 17 of the 19 running back carries. And then Chris Rodriguez, who had kind of been splitting those early down snaps with him, he was completely phased out of the offense, only took 1 snap on that side of the ball. So if JCM can maintain that usage, it is wheels up for him moving forward. Now looking at tier 4, going to start off this tier with Courtland Sutton. I like the matchup here against the Giants. They're allowing the 3rd most points per game to the wide receiver position. Sutton has had 4 really strong games and then just 2 complete clunkers. I think he bounces back with a really nice performance this week against the Giants. Then I have Brian Thomas Jr., who hopefully had his first real breakout game this season in week 6. 10 targets, 8 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. Still a believer in the talent. Hopefully this kind of kickstarts closer to the wide receiver 1 production that we were expecting. Then I have Kamani Vidal going up against the Colts. It really seems like he's going to be the lead back here, at least in the short term, until they make a move or Marion Hampton comes back from injury. But he had a 76% opportunity share. He was super efficient on the ground, 18 carries for 124 yards, also was targeted 4 times, caught 3 of them for 14 yards and a touchdown. You just want pieces of this Chargers offense. And at this point, it looks like Kamani Vidal should be viewed as their wide receiver 1. Then I've got Cam Scatabo going up against the Broncos. I do want to rank Scatabo higher. It's just a really tough matchup this week. The Broncos have allowed the 4th fewest points per game to the running back position. The Giants have the lowest implied point total of any team this week. So that is not great. But Cam Scatabo's also just been a stud. He's averaging 20.6 PPR points per game. He's someone who gets a lot of the valuable touches. He's going to get the goal line work. He's also very involved as a pass catcher. So even in a trailing game script, I think he'll be fine. I just think the overall ceiling is maybe a little bit concerning this week compared to some of his previous matchups. Then at 31 and 32, I have back-to-back Chargers wide receivers with Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston. Ladd finally had his first big game, 7 for 100 and a touchdown. I like the matchup here against the Colts. They're allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Obviously, that also applies to Quentin Johnston. I would expect him to make his return this week. He missed week 6 with a hamstring injury. He was back at practice on Wednesday in a literal fashion. It seems like he's trending towards being ready to go against the Colts. Then I've got a few more wide receivers in a row here. DK Metcalf, Tedero McMillan, AJ Brown, all kind of guys in different unique situations. DK Metcalf's really been killing it in the efficiency department, getting into the end zone. It's just the floor that I think is a little bit sketchy with his lack of consistent volume. For Tedero McMillan, finally got into the end zone a couple of times. Volume was actually his worst game of the season, but I'm a big believer in his talent. I think he'll continue to be a safe fantasy play. And then for AJ Brown, I think we are due for just a monster AJ Brown game. The volume has been there throughout his entire career. He's pretty much been the most efficient wide receiver in the NFL. And I just can't imagine, if he's still getting 8+ targets, he's going to have some ultra efficient, big-time games moving forward. Then the final player in tier 4 is going to be Trey McBride going up against the Packers. Still unclear about what Marv's status is going to be for this week. I have him ranked in this video, but there's no guarantee he plays with that concussion. Trey McBride is coming off a really strong week 6, 11 targets, 8 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown. We're also not quite sure who's going to play quarterback. Is it Kyler Murray? Is it Jacoby Brissett? That is still up in the air. To be honest, I don't really think it makes a massive difference for Trey McBride. Like, he just had this huge game with Brissett at quarterback, but he was a monster last year, and that was with Kyler Murray. So either way, I think Trey McBride is obviously a really strong high-end tight end one. Now moving into a pretty large tier 5 here, going to start it off with Breece Hall going up against the Panthers. This is kind of an interesting spot for Breece because I could see this just being a complete disaster class for the entire Jets offense and Breece really struggling, but I could also see this just being like a complete monster Breece Hall game. So I'll start off with the Panthers run defense, which has actually been pretty solid, especially in the last couple of games. They've completely shut down Javonte Williams and Devon Achane on the ground. And so you look at this Jets offense, the passing attack is likely going to be abysmal. You have no Garrett Wilson. It had already been really bad. Like, there are just no weapons. The wide receiver position completely cooked. You've got like Mason Taylor probably as your best target when you combine the wide receiver and the tight end rooms. So that's not great, but then you could see the Jets offense just really relying on Breece Hall, giving him a lot of work on the ground, also getting him involved in the passing game. That was a big bummer from last week, was like they were really struggling and Breece Hall didn't catch a single pass. I actually don't even think he was targeted a single time in that week 6 game. And so he has had a solid weekly workload, 18.7 opportunities per game. That's just the battle where it's like, I think he's going to be used heavily, but it's also possible the Jets offense is just so bad that there's just no efficiency and no touchdown upside. I think where I have him right now is kind of like a fair middle ground. Then for J.K. Dobbins, I think this is a good bounce back opportunity. Easier matchup this week going up against the Giants. His workload has been consistent. He just doesn't have a super high weekly floor because there's just no pass catching upside with him. Then I've got a couple of tight ends back to back, Tyler Warren, George Kittle. Warren's averaging a very respectable 14.1 points per game. They use him creatively. He scored touchdowns in each of the last 3 games. And then George Kittle coming back from that hamstring injury. Might take him like a week or two to fully settle in, but I really wouldn't have any reservations about just firing him up right away. Then I've got Keenan Allen going up against the Colts. I talked about it with Ladd and Quentin Johnston, how it was a good matchup. That obviously also carries over here to Keenan Allen. Hasn't been super impressive in the last 3 games, but he's still commanding solid volume. I think better games are ahead for Keenan. Then in that same matchup, I have Michael Pittman going up against the Chargers. He's been fine as like the wide receiver one for the Colts. Volume hasn't been quite as crazy as you'd like, but like a fine mid to back end wide receiver 2 play, especially with a lot of the injuries at the wide receiver position. Then I've got a couple of running backs, DeAndre Swift, Rico Dowdle. Swift actually looked really good coming out of the bye. I think that was a big game for him. Got involved as a pass catcher, long touchdown reception. So I like Swift as a running back too. Rico Dowdle is just a really tough player to rank because I am expecting Chuba Hubbard to come back. If Chuba remains out, which I think is kind of unlikely, I mean, you're firing up Rico in like honestly, just throw him in tier 1. Like, are you really not going to play Rico Dowdle if Chuba Hubbard doesn't play this week? But if Chuba is back, I do think we're going to be looking at some sort of committee. I would expect Rico to lead it. I don't know how you have 473 scrimmage yards in the last 2 games, like combined, and don't keep the running back 1 role. Like, that would just be insane. But I still think he's not going to like dominate the usage like he has in the past couple of games, but like 32 PPR points in back-to-back games. That is just absurd. After Rico, going to go with Jake Ferguson going up against the Commanders. I do think he takes a hit with CeeDee Lamb coming back. I think he takes a bigger hit than George Pickens because the Jake Ferguson calling card really was just the volume he was getting through the air. Now, he's still going to have touchdown upside. This is still going to be a really strong passing attack, one of the best in the NFL. But now he's likely getting relegated to like number 3 target territory, which isn't awful on a good offense, but it's certainly not as good as like a clear top 2 weapon with Dak at quarterback. Then I've got Travis Etienne. Production's kind of stalled a little bit. Jaguars' run game hasn't been quite as efficient, but we have seen a little bit of an uptick in the pass catching work for Etienne. If you can get that early season efficiency with some of the more volume through the air, I think Etienne's ceiling could be pretty interesting. Then I've got Ramondre going up against the Titans. This is a really nice matchup. The Titans are allowing the 5th most points per game to the running back position. The Patriots are 7-point favorites, so it should be a favorable game script. And then Ramondre is just getting the majority of this backfield. He's also taking pretty much all the goal line work. So the clear Patriots running back one at this point in the season. Then I've got a couple of wide receivers, Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs. Chris Olave, just very high weekly floor, targeted at least 10 times in 5 of the 6 games this season. I will say he was limited on Wednesday with a hip injury. That's not something I'm super concerned about. I would fully expect him to suit up this week against the Bears. And then for Stephon Diggs, also limited on Wednesday with a chest injury. Also not really concerned about it. I think the concern for Diggs is just his weekly route participation, where it's not up there with a lot of the wide receiver ones that are going in this range, but we've seen, especially, 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's still been able to produce even in like some limited routes. Then we're going to wrap up tier 5 with 3 straight running backs, Jaylen Warren, Jordan Mason, and Isaiah Pacheco. I really like the matchup here for Jaylen Warren. The Bengals are allowing the most points per game to the running back position. We did see more of a competitive split than I would have liked between Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, but I still view Warren as the number 1, and I do like the matchup here against the Bengals. Then for Jordan Mason, strong production as the starter, 15.5 PPR points per game. Eagles defense, has a reputation for being very good. They are giving up the 7th most points per game to the running back position. I think the concern with Mason is just like the lack of receiving usage, where if they are trailing, does he kind of get phased out of the game? Still, I like him as like a back-end RB2 play. Then for Isaiah Pacheco, which is just a really solid matchup, likely a very good game script here. The Chiefs have the 2nd highest implied point total. They're an 11.5-point favorites, so there's going to be a lot of touchdown upside. Could be a lot of volume on the ground, and he took 60% of the backfield in week 6. Now moving into tier 6, going to go with a couple of wide receivers here, Jordan Addison, Kendrick Bourne. Addison's just been really solid in back-to-back games coming off the suspension. Kendrick Bourne has been a monster over the last 2 weeks, 142 receiving yards in both of those games. And then Ricky Pearsall did not practice on Wednesday. Doesn't look great for him suiting up on Sunday. I think until Ricky Pearsall's back and you've still got like Juwan Jennings banged up, Kendrick Bourne should continue to be a nice option at the wide receiver position. Then I've got David Montgomery going up against the Buccaneers. The usage has been a little bit underwhelming this season. We did hear Dan Campbell talk about wanting to like even up the usage between these 2 running backs. We'll see if that actually happens. I do think like game script wise, this is a better spot here against the Bucs, where they're 4.5-point favorites. The Bucs are allowing the 9th most points per game to the running back position. So even without like the Campbell comments, I still think this would be like a fine opportunity to play David Montgomery, but you certainly don't feel as confident as you did like firing him up last year, where the workload was a lot closer to 50-50. A couple of more running backs here. Alvin Kamara going up against the Bears. He's been a little bit underwhelming this season. It is a good matchup on paper, 6th in points per game allowed to running backs. He did not practice on Wednesday with an ankle injury. At this point, I'm not super concerned. Veteran running back. I think he's been on the injury report pretty consistently with a few different things. To me, like, I'm not super concerned unless he continues to miss time and we're getting negative reports. It seems like they're probably just playing it safe with a older player. And then for Chase Brown, did not love the usage Samaje Perine saw last week, but I do expect this to be a more competitive game script where we should see more Chase Brown. After Brown, I have 4 straight tight ends with Dallas Goedert, Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, and Travis Kelce. Goddard's just kind of been fun. 20 targets in the last 2 weeks is pretty wild. Week 6, a monster game, 9 for 110 and a touchdown. They're using him creatively in the red zone. He scored 5 touchdowns so far this season. We'll see if it continues, but I do think you have to ride the hot hand here with him. Kraft, Laporta, I talked about this in the tight end rankings video. I think they're very similar bets where they've got touchdown upside on good offenses, not the highest weekly floors. And then for Travis Kelce, he's really kind of rebounded over the last few weeks. It was a rough start to the season. He's looked a lot better. I think Rashee Rice raises the ceiling of this offense moving forward. On that same offense, I have Xavier Worthy. I'm a little bit concerned about Xavier Worthy. I'm not going to lie. He was someone who I was really into coming into the season. I thought, especially with like the Rashee Rice early season suspension, we could really see Worthy kind of establish a strong role in this offense. And, due to things that were out of his control with the shoulder injury, he just never really got that opportunity. So I still think he'll be a factor. He'll have his splash plays. I just don't know how reliable he's going to be on like a week-to-week basis, or is he going to be like a Jamison Williams type where he'll have his big games and then he'll go like, 3 targets, 2 receptions for 20 yards the next week. That is a little bit of a concern there with Worthy. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. He was limited on Wednesday with that concussion. At this point, I don't have a strong lean if he plays. We'll see. If he does, I think he's like a fine wide receiver 3 option. And then the 7th and final tier, starting it off with the wide receiver 2s behind stud wide receiver 1s. That is T. Higgins and Devonta Smith. Neither guy is involved in like a super fun offense, but both talented players. You could do worse as like a flex play. Then I have Woody Marks going up against the Seahawks. I think in this matchup against Seattle, Woody Marks is the running back that's probably going to benefit the most from this game script. They're 3.5-point underdogs. I know he had the rough week 5, but that was definitely like the Nick Chubb leading, just like grind it out type of style they wanted at running back. I think this could be a solid Woody Marks game. Then I've got the Seahawks running backs. I mean, this is just a gross committee. You have Zach Charbonnet taking like more of the opportunities. He's getting all the valuable touches with like the 3rd downs, the 2-minute drill snaps. He's getting all the goal line work, and yet he is still extremely unproductive. And then you have Kenneth Walker, who's been a lot more efficient, but he's just not getting any of the fun usage. So tough to feel great about either of those guys. And then the last 2 guys in this tier, 2 wide receivers, Romeo Doubs and Wan'Dale Robinson. Doubs has been targeted 17 times in the last 2 games, potentially getting Christian Watson back, but I don't think he's really going to be eating into the like Romeo Doubs piece of the pie offensively. And then for Wan'Dale Robinson, he's coming off a really nice week 6 receptions for 84 yards and a touchdown. But like I talked about with Scatabo, this is a really tough matchup against the Broncos. Like I said, the Giants have the lowest implied point total, and then the Broncos are allowing the 2nd fewest points per game to the wide receiver position. So kind of getting into some of the worse options here in tier 7. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 70 rankings. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.